So welcome back to We Don't Have Time, broadcasting from London Climate Action Week 2026, here in the offices and premises of Sustainable Ventures. Ingmar Renshag, the CEO of We Don't Have Time, is back with us. Ingmar, what have you been doing here at London Climate Action Week? What are you up to?
We're doing this, but it's actually not so much for me. It's you and the team, and the broadcasts are really working very well, and we have got this amazing partnership with Sustainable Venture. I really love this place. For the viewer that haven't been here, it's like a hub for a lot of climate tech companies sharing an office in central London, and the energy and the vibe here, I love it.
Actually, I'd say one thing that maybe viewers have been seeing at some moment is behind us we've got a background, and above that there's a lot of plaster, on the wall. It looks like they haven't properly finished the job, but in fact that plaster, I'm told, is there because it absorbs pollution and carbon into the structure of the building. So that's why you see the walls have plaster revealed all over the place at Sustainable Ventures, because it's a climate solution.
It's climate tech.
Yeah, it's climate tech. So we are going to do a few things today which you wanted to talk about, but maybe I can talk a little bit about what you did the day before, because I think you went to see a very important person who actually maybe received a new piece of headgear.
Yes, and we were actually both invited to the king, but you needed to be here.
Yes, that's true.
So I had the opportunity to go to this reception.
King who? King Charles?
King Charles III.
The third, absolutely.
And he actually invited more than 200 climate leaders to his palace. And the theme of the event, of the reception, were not just another mingle event. It was actually how to reduce super pollutants and methane emission, because that's the climate emergency brake. If we cut that, we can actually cool the planet with up to 0.5 degrees. So this is the fastest solution we have to buy more time. And it's this was the campaign we ran at We Don't Have Time at COP29. So it was a big honor to be invited to the king, but it was a very big honor to be invited to the king for what we actually talked about years ago on a subject not many people are aware of outside the inner circle of climate policy. So I went there. It was very heavy traffic because it's this extreme heat wave, so the people are not trusting the subway anymore. So I was almost late, but I made it through the gate. And it was a remarkable gathering at this palace. Very old school. You were not even allowed to have mobile phones. I think that's a brilliant strategy, because if people have mobile phones, the only thing people do are watching the phone.
Yeah.
So people were really present, and it was very interesting people there. It was Antonio Guterres having a very good speech about the climate crisis, and many friends of the We Don't Have Time show that we have had here before. So it was a great group, and it was not just a group to mingle. It was actually about mobilizing around this issue for COP31, and it was the king together with the UK government that were facilitating this. So very hopeful, I would say. But the very special thing about this event, it was so hot, because you didn't have air conditioning 500 years ago. This building is from the 16th century.
Yes, in James's palace. Yeah.
Yes. So it was so hot. I think it was more than 30 degrees. So everyone was like bathing in their sweat, including the king. And I had the opportunity to actually speak to the king during the mingle. And I wanted to thank him for what he has done for his whole career. 50 years he has been advocating for the environment and climate. So I really wanted to say that. And I really wanted to appreciate that he's not only doing this reception, but also defending science. So I gave him, I think I was the only guest there that actually gave the king a gift. I gave him the Make Science Great Again cap. And that smile and that that laughter, that will be something I remember for the rest of my life, I think.
I think he sometimes people underestimate his intelligence, but I think he understood very clearly what the message about this was about, and who also perhaps it was referring to in another country. Yes, and fair enough. Yeah.
So it was an interesting conversation. I mean, it was not long. It was just a couple of minutes maybe. But I also took the opportunity to talk about that we're launching W. So that is something he thought were interesting. So maybe we can see him there in the future. Let's see.
On W Social, yeah.
But I mean, this gathering is a lot of hope because leadership matters. And when the biggest king in the world actually are having a reception talking about mobilizing about climate emergency break, not just saying that climate are important, but actually focusing on what can matter the most, buying us more time. That gives me a lot of hope.
Yeah, fast action. Yeah, it's interesting that was chosen. And I think it's also a measure of the UK government's interest in the topic as well, because he would have asked about, what would be a good topic? And they might have proposed that among several. He'd picked this one. But it shows their enthusiasm as well as a nation.
Yeah, absolutely. And the COP presidents were there. Yeah. Antonio Guterres were there. So the mobilization was actually in the room.
Yeah. Fast running out of time, but just very quickly, we talked a little bit earlier about W Social, and there will be a London launch shortly today about that. But also one other thing that has grown out of us being the global broadcaster for the Santa Marta conference, which took place over a month ago in Colombia with 57 countries, basically meeting to decide how do we get off fossil fuels with lots of experts as well to give advice. And we're announcing something today that we think might help that process.
Yes, so we have a double launch reception. We will broadcast it tomorrow, but it's happening here today. We have 400 people on the guest list. We only have 200 seats. We'll see how that goes. A little bit nervous. Interest is extremely high. And what we actually are going to present, W, of course, but also the transition away from fossil fuel tracker. And what we're doing here, we are using AI. I mean, AI are causing so much crazy things, disinformation, fake image, fake videos, etc. But you can also use AI for good. And W are using AI to get you out of the bubble, see the trends, what people talk about. The transition away tracker, we are actually gathering climate diplomacy. What countries are advocating for a transition away from fossil fuel, what countries are advocating against it, and what countries are maybe soon going to move into the right direction. So we create this dashboard with a lot of sources of information where people can see who are supporting a coalition, who are supporting the fossil fuel transition, and who is against it. Because people don't know. People don't know that there's now a coalition of the willing of 59 countries. You said 57, but 57 didn't count Colombia, Netherlands, that were the host countries. So with them, it's 59. And what we want to do, we want people to be aware of this so that more countries wants to join the party. And we're using AI to collect information about this. And we are now in a phase, this is not launched yet, so it's a soft launch. But we are gathering those people in the room here today because we want to get more partners on board. We need media on board, we need funding on board to build this, so we have something that everyone can see. This is kind of the base. So we don't have a discussion. Is it 100 countries that wants to have a fossil fuel phase out? Is it 50 countries? Is it 150? We need to know exactly where we are. It's a KPI for the transition away from fossil fuel.
Got you. And one last thing. I interviewed the Colombian minister and also the Dutch minister, who were the two formidable women at the Santa Marta conference. And apparently it's no longer the coalition of the willing, it's the coalition of the doing.
Yes.
So maybe we have to update the tracker to the doing.
Let's just do it.
Let's just do it. Yeah. Cool. Thanks very much, Ingmar.
Thank you.
So, more wonderful guests here at London Climate Action Week here in London. We're at the offices, the premises of Sustainable Ventures, and we thank them very much for supporting this broadcast by giving us a studio here. Two wonderful guests, Martina Otto, she's heading up the UN Environment Secretariat for the Climate and Clean Air Coalition. No stranger to the We Don't Have Time shows, and a good supporter, so thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Nick, for having me.
For those that don't know, of course, the super pollutants are a range of mainly gases, methane being the one that springs to mind first, but there are others that are, well, yes, they could be an emergency brake for climate action, and we'll come to that. We're also joined, and very happy to have with us, Adalberto Maluf, who is the co-chair of the Climate and Clean Air Coalition and Brazil's National Secretary for Urban Environment, Water Resources and Environmental Quality. So just a small job that you have at the ministry there. My God, it's covering almost everything. I want to ask you both first a question, though, which is, where were you both yesterday? What were you up to? What were you doing? Who were you seeing? Maybe we'll give it to the man first for gender balance purposes. Go on, where were you yesterday?
Thank you, Nick. It's a great pleasure to be here again with you. We don't have time. And well, yesterday we had a reception with King Charles to talk about methane, air quality, super pollutant. It was extremely interesting, an exhibition of different stakeholders, what they're doing it. And we had a chance to talk to the King and explain a little bit about the work that everybody's trying to do in order to tackle and reduce the super pollutants, which right now represent already half of the global warming.
Yeah, well, I mean, I must say, if you get the king of England actually, backing this topic, I mean, that's a hell of a public relations coup, because I mean, we know that Prince Charles, when he was Prince Charles and became King Charles, he was very passionate about climate change and things like that. So he's knowledgeable about these topics. But to actually, as the King, actually host this event on non-CO2 pollutants, including methane,
Yeah, I think, indeed, the topic made it to the headlines thanks to him giving it the space. I think that's pretty amazing. So there's a couple of newspapers in the UK that have this topic as the headline, obviously with a photo of His Majesty, but it's been pretty amazing. And as you said, long-standing commitment to the topic. And he's really after, he kept asking, so how do we make it happen? It's all about the implementation. And I think it's fantastic that he's lending his voice to it.
And probably also a good sign of the commitments of the other co-chair nation, if it still is the UK, with Brazil on this topic. So I think that's it's a good signal for moving forward on this.
Yeah. And he wasn't the only high-level person who has been talking about it, because we had the UN Secretary General making his call.
Yes,
Maybe
absolutely.
that was a question you wanted to ask me.
No, actually, but I will. Yes, well, I used to work for the UN, so I better mention the Secretary General. Yes, well, it was good. He made a very good speech, I think.
Yeah, he made a very good speech, and he came obviously as well to the reception that was attended by King Charles. And he put out a call to act on methane, which, as you said, is one of the most prominent, but not the only, of the super pollutants. It can give us, I mean, it's responsible for a third of the warming, and it can give us 0.3 in the end.
0.3 of a degree.
Of a degree of reduction. May sound small. We keep talking. Every fraction of a degree matters. Where we are with right now with the overshoot. And exceeding the limits that science told us we should not be exceeding. And it was very concrete. 3 key points for each of the key sectors that he put out.
Right.
So real action
I'm
agenda.
sure, I know how the UN system works, and I'm sure that you, as the Secretariat of the UN, the UNEP Climate and Clean Air Coalition, could have had some inputs to that speech. So that's well done. There was another reason to cheer a little bit as well, because, you know, we had in Santa Marta in Colombia just over a month ago, just under 60 countries coming together, wanting to exit fossil fuels and working together on that. But what was also interesting, I mean, there were many things that happened there, and there were many interesting discussions on how you exit fossil fuels. But, methane did come up as being, it was kind of singled out as something special for fast action, fast movement. And I think that was a good signal too. And of course, congratulations to Belém, of course, and the Brazilian government, because just when, at the end, when certain countries were saying no to text about phasing down and phasing out fossil fuels, the chair of that, the president of COP30, Brazilian gentleman, says, no, well, we're going to try and handle this through a different process. And let's see how it goes. So that was, again, seen in Santa Marta with the non-CO2 pollutants being very high on the agenda. Yep.
For sure, Nick. President Lula has set 2 global roadmaps as extremely priority at COP30. The roadmap to reduce illegal deforestation around the world. So even yesterday night, also Prince Williams hosted and Windsor Palace, also a big high-level event to talk about this process throughout with the Tropical Forest Fund Forever. In the second, and I think it was probably the hottest debates we had throughout COP30, you remember, was President Lula's proposal also to have a roadmap for phasing off fossil fuel. We tried our best to enter throughout the official negotiations. It wasn't in the agenda. We had some, little wins here or there, but this process led by the COP30 presidency is now really creating a roadmap that can understand and initially divide each country based on their kind of archetypes, where they are, how much they consume of energy, if they import, export, what they do, and what are the solutions that they can do in order to phase out and reduce, aiming at eliminating the use of fossil fuel. So the super pollutants, especially the fugitive emissions of methane, also became a very important topic. As you know, 40% of the methane comes from the fossil fuel industry. So we are talking about 0.3 degrees that could be, saved from increasing in these next years. And because of the overshoot we are living on, we are already facing 1.5 degrees. Look, the extreme heat we are facing now. In this London Climate Week, I think methane is becoming, a consensus that it's our lowest hanging fruit. It's the thing we can do faster to reduce the global warming, this emission. So that's why I'm so happy to see that this process that started at COP30, led by Brazilian presidency, they have now highlighted, the G7 just had a huge thing on methane. Now we have King Charles, really pushing the agenda. We have the UN Secretary General's call, which will expand the action throughout the system. So now geopolitics, it's not easy on some areas, but on this specific topic, I think multilateralism is working, and we are showing that the action agenda, like we launched it in COP, the no organic waste, or the country accelerators, or HAIs to reduce methane from the agriculture, the fertilizers declaration. Well, there's so many things that Brazil, UK, and CCAC have done. So I'm happy to see this process moving forward.
I had an interviewee earlier from Climate Mapper. They do this, is it Carbon Mapper? Sorry, Carbon Mapper. And, the satellites and things like that. And he was talking about how, that's going. And I just said, obviously, we'd like to see, some positive signs from the oil and gas industry that they are indeed reducing emissions from, leaks from oil and gas. And I said, but every time we try to invite one of the oil and gas majors onto our show to talk about this, they won't come. But he said something interesting. He said, yeah, okay, I understand what you're saying. He said, but I can say there are some oil and gas companies that when we report to them and say, you've got a big leak coming out of this pipeline here, he said that they go and they fix it and they fix the leak. In other words, they respond to the information they're receiving. He didn't say all, but he said some, which gave me a little bit of hope that indeed there might be something going on in the oil and gas industry to respond to this issue of methane.
Yeah, and definitely there's more to it. So there's the voluntary action that they take because they get alerts and they measure themselves and they see where the problems are. And then there's regulation kicking in. And there are more and more countries that are actually interested in putting regulation forward in this sector. We have supported 10 already through our fossil fuel regulatory program. And we had earlier this week a good session as well, where Carbon Mapper was part of the discussion as well, saying, the data train is running. We have the data. We know, thanks to the satellites that have been put into the air, we know. And it is about people. It's about capacity in countries. And not all of them have the capacity to do something with the data. And that's why we have to build that up as well. And then to actually help translate that into obligations for the companies. And that's where the regulation is key. So we had a good discussion around that.
We're fast running out of time. I know it seems unbelievable, but it's a short session that we have here. And I think just quickly, let's look to Turkey, COP31. I can't believe there's so many happened. Is this going to be a good big topic on the agenda? Adalberto, first from you.
Oh, yes, for sure. We have been yesterday also. We had the Turkish minister, all the COP presidency from COP31. Today in the morning, we even had meetings between COP30 presidency and COP31 presidency on the action agenda. So as you all know, waste and circular economy is one of the most important topic for the Turkish presidency. So our program that we launched called Now, No Organic Waste, and also getting into more circular economy approaches together with methane reduction became one of the top priorities for them. And also when we talk about resiliency cities, and thinking about the impact that extreme heat and, pollution and other will have city, this topic is also part of the agenda.
Yeah, because that's a lot about air quality as well, isn't it? That linked with your agenda. And Australia, of course, we can't forget them. I think they have a big issue with methane, perhaps from their coal mining sector as well. That's something that we did talk about with Carbon Mapper.
Coal
what do you
mining
think?
and livestock.
Yeah.
And we had Australian participation in a number of the discussions, and obviously they're they have the lead on the negotiations. We work on all the outside of the negotiation space, but I think there are good discussions going on between Turkey and Australia on how to take things forward, and we really hope that between Australia and Ethiopia, that will host the following COP, there will be a good discussion already on some of the measures in the agriculture sector as well.
Well, thank you. It was very short, but we were delighted to have you here with this update. I think it's marvelous that that you met King Charles III, and I'm very jealous because I had to work here. But I did meet, when he was Prince Charles, with Achim Steiner, the former head of UNEP, and we chatted to him not at this particular palace, at another place called Clarence House some years ago, for 30 minutes. So maybe I had a longer chat with the Prince, but you had a chat with the king, so I don't know who wins on that one. Thank you, Martina.
Keep up this competition.
Thank you, Martina. Thank you, Adalberto. Thank you so much for being with us here.
Yeah. Pleasure to be here with you.
Thank you. Great. So some more wonderful guests here at London Climate Action Week 2026. We're broadcasting here from Sustainable Ventures in County Hall, just a stone's throw away or a short pigeon flight away from the House of Commons. So we're very delighted to be here. We're going to talk about energy. We're going to link this a little bit with the Santa Marta conference that took place, well, it's over a month ago now. Maybe it's even 2 months. It's hard to track that time as well. But and also, but the general topic as well of the energy transition, which is really important overall. To do that, I've got Richard Foland, who's head of policy at Carbon Tracker Initiative. I've got Molly Walton, who's director Energy We Mean Business Coalition, and I've got Vicky Sins, head of program at the World Benchmarking Alliance. Hi, everybody. Microphone straight up. There we go.
Hello.
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 Okay. Richard, the gender balance here is all wrong, but I'm going to go to you first. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit, obviously, about Santa Marta.
Yeah.
You were one of the coordinators for the economics and data
Yes.
work stream at the Santa Marta conference. What were those work streams? And maybe you can also talk about maybe what can policymakers do to encourage the finance sector to invest in a fossil-free economy?
Yeah, thank you very much, Nick. I think, first of all, what really came across, as you say, with us coordinating the economics and data work stream, is that economics and finance is front and center here. You know, if we're looking about this sort of huge issue of fossil fuel phase out in terms of constructing national roadmaps and so on, not only to have the energy and climate ministries involved, but needing finance, economics and so on. So requiring a whole of government approach towards it. And I would link that then to the second point that you, or question which you asked me there, which is about what can be done in terms of, you know, incentivizing around this. 2 points I would make under that heading, Nick. One, which is the risk equation has to come forward more as far as investors are concerned. You know, here we are now, where London is cooking, as the Secretary General said, and you know, for investors, just really to get this whole issue around physical climate risk, how this is growing, and then the other part of the equation, I would say, is on the opportunity side. You know, what can be done in terms of stronger policy signals, which can go to investors. We talk a lot to investors at Carbon Tracker. They say to us, stronger policy signals, greater clarity of vision over the longer term about the transition, and so on, and bringing forward fiscal incentives and subsidies more to sort of balance, you know, so much has been done for the fossil fuel industry over the years in that way.
I think that's a very good point. And we had the special climate envoy on for the European Union earlier today. And he also brought up that point, which I think has been lost recently, because when we think of the Stern reports, you know, calculating how much cost there will be to the global economy from climate change if you don't deal with it. And it just seems in recent years that's all kind of got slightly forgotten. We need to bring that back and remind people that this is an investment not only in the future of a stable planet, but an investment in the economic functioning of this planet to be able to function and deliver the things it needs to do for everybody on board. Let me come to Molly here. So you represent the Women Business Coalition. I know you weren't in town, as it were, in Santa Marta, but I'm sure you were watching and supporting from a distance. And you've now launched this Electrify Now campaign, which seems to time perfectly with what the COP31 is supposed to be doing, right? Which is 35 by 35.
By 2035,
which, to get this right, this is not a new SUV. It's a 35% of the economy will be electrified by 2035.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Tell us about your initiative and how it all ties in with that.
Yeah, so happy to. So, I mean, maybe taking one step back, because I think it's important to center why electrification is so critical when we're talking about transition away from fossil fuels. And it's really that opportunity to cascade that clean, affordable, reliable power across the system, right? If we want to transfer away from fossil fuels, we won't be able to do it unless we electrify our businesses, our homes, our transport, our industry, right? That's what's going to bring that link and that tether to fossil fuels. So I think that's why the two agendas are really coming together, why electrification is so central, and why this initiative Electrify Now and the work that we're doing through our own program, Electric Advantage, are so important. It's really bringing the business voice and putting that spotlight on electrification as that critical lever for driving clean, affordable, productive, competitive, secure economies. And so we are part of Electrify Now. We're bringing the business voice into that important conversation. And we're also really trying to work to bring businesses across the value chain. So it can't just be a supply conversation. The demand side is really important, and make sure that businesses are asking for the policies that are really going to accelerate, showcasing what they're doing. They're doing amazing work on electrification and really raising the profile of why this is such a critical lever that we need to be talking more about.
And does Electrify Now allow fossil fuels to do the electrification or not?
So I think that's an important point. I think it's clean electrification, right? So this is really where you see that opportunity to combine some of the agendas. So electrification can really enable that tripling of renewables, that doubling of energy efficiency, electrification is an efficiency gain in and of itself. It's 2 to 3 times more efficient.
Yes, that's
than
why I
fossil
asked,
fuels.
because there is a gain from
Yes.
doing it, even if you're
There
using
is.
fossil fuels.
But you do want clean electrification, really to accelerate towards clean electrified economies. That's the focus.
Okay, good. We can come back to this. So, Vicky, you were in Santa Marta. It's becoming like you weren't there. So, you know, but no, we're not going to play that game.
At least you found somebody who was.
You happen to be there in Santa Marta as one of the co-hosts of the Private Sector Dialogues, and you released a report on the outcomes. What were the key takeaways from the business perspective on this conference?
Yeah, and I think it very much speaks to what's already been said here as well. But I think also one step back, the reason why I think there was a very key need for the private sector to be involved in this is that the outcomes of these processes cannot be done without the role of finance, the role of policy, the civil society, as well as the private sector. Because everybody says we need to move to implementation, and who are the ones that need to implement it? The private sector has a clear role to play in that. And I think one of the things that the outcomes of the report is quite clear on is that we see that there is a clear need to articulate the responsibility of the private sector to develop credible transition plans that allow for electrification to happen, but also to allow for financial flows to support capital expenditures that are needed to support the move away from fossil fuels, and to really be sure that we say, okay, how do we create sort of the incentives that are right for the private sector by addressing the subsidy question, and reallocating the subsidies to support the private sector. Yes, we need policy, but we also articulated quite clearly is that the private sector is ready to move. There are already clear indication that the solutions are there. And now by joining up with under the outcomes of the transition away from fossil fuel conference, we see that there is a great potential for companies to actually start leading on this agenda again. And there are indeed great examples, and the report hopefully stimulates that by saying, don't wait for the policies to come. The policies will follow once also the private sector and finance make a clear stance on we are ready to develop these transition plans. We want to move away from fossil fuels. I think the last couple of months have highlighted the dependencies on this. So also stimulate rethinking what that means for businesses to be dependent on it, what it means in disruption of supply chain, and how that sort of changes the discussion internally. Is like, if we're going to do these capital expenditures, are we going to invest this in short-term solutions or long-term resilience of our own business and supply chain? Hence also meaning that they want to become less dependent on the international fossil fuel subs.
So maybe finally the debate is over about whether who's more reliable, the fossil fuels or the renewables? And the debate is just over now, right? I mean, the International Renewable Energy Agency put out that report. I mean, very clearly just, a couple of weeks ago, whatever, that there is nowhere in the world, if you combine storage with renewables, that it's not cheaper than fossil fuels?
I mean, if I can come in here, Nick, I mean, Ukraine demonstrated that to us. And, what has happened in the Middle East now is, the answer to around energy security and so on is not, more volatile, more expensive fossil fuels. We've got, sources of much greater energy security, domestic, homegrown, etc. And with all the other benefits accruing from that as well. I mean, it's really got to be now to sort of how we can actually collectively accelerate the transition, not if there should be a transition in the first place.
But I actually want to pick up on that point, if I may, because I think it's really important. I think historically we've really focused on the supply side of the equation, and I think you're seeing something different now, where you're really focusing on supply and electrification. Going back to your question, clean electrification. And we just did some polling of business executives across 18 markets. It was done during the height of the Strait of Hormuz crisis. And the findings that came out of that is business executives see electrification, clean electrification, as providing energy security. 90% of businesses said that electrification would deliver energy security. And they're also saying it would help them with their competitiveness. So businesses are not going back into fossil fuels. They're really leaning into this agenda. And importantly, I think to your point on the technologies are there, the business case is there. 90% of them also said they wanted to electrify by 2035. What's stopping them? What they're concerned about? is policy. Is it moving fast enough? 72% of them said that government policy is not moving fast
Right.
enough.
So what are these policies that would enable electrification? You want to start on this?
Go ahead.
Well, I mean, I
Let's
suppose
do this in
yeah.
an orderly, organized fashion. you know.
Orderly transition.
An
across
orderly
all of us,
transition.
right? I mean, we speak a lot to pension funds. You know, these are where the deep pools of capital are. You know, the hundreds of billions of dollars and so on. And they are saying to us, stronger policy. Absolutely right. They talk about how scenario analysis, which is a critical element for how they sort of base their investment policies and so on, how they manage their risk. You know, these risk managers and so on. That's got to be improved. It's not sufficiently fit for purpose at the moment. It's not up to speed with the science. You know, and that's really important. And then you know, I would come back again to the incentives, the opportunities side of the equation as well, which are strong long-term policy signals across government, so you don't get mixed messages. You know, where energy and climate are saying this, then the finance ministry is saying something which is contradicting. That's really important.
Yeah, I think maybe to complement two things on that. I think on the one side, I think this speaks to your earlier point that you said. I think one thing that is very clear that national plans need to become national investment plans. They need to be sectoral, so they need to be clearly articulating which sectors does this apply to. How are we going to help with the finance ministries to support investments to flow and to have also, you know, grid development? How do we support permitting to accelerate? I think this is something that needs to happen on a national and a local level. Also, how do you make sure that it's embedded into communities, etc., because there's a big element on that. But I think the second point is because it speaks a bit on how do we transition the existing demand to sort of the renewable side of things. But I think one point that was made earlier this week by the Secretary General is also that we need to have a clear policy in place on new demand coming to market from the AI boom and the development of data centers. And I would really, really strongly advocate that we push on the relevant policies to be in place, that whilst these data centers are being developed, that there is a clear policy regulation put in place on the need to develop that from a green electricity point of view, and also that there is a need to be put on, the onus needs to be put on these companies as well
And to harvest,
to take their role and
harvest all the
responsibility.
heat that's pouring out of them as
Heat,
well into
water.
energy efficiency type, like district heating projects or whatever it is. Yeah, we need to join things up.
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe just one last thing, because the policy question, this is very relevant. Earlier this week, we launched a business statement. So we had over 100 businesses, all brands that we know and love. We're calling on governments to put electrification at the heart of economic and security strategy. And they are asking for a couple of things. Yes, policy certainty is really important to enable those business investments, but it's also around tax incentives. You mentioned that, but that is one of the biggest levers that governments have, is to realign those fiscal incentives towards electrification, towards renewables, towards grid investment. And this is something that businesses are calling for. They're also asking for better use of grids. So investment, modernize our grids, invest in the grids. That is a critical weak link that we need to address. And this is something that business is really asking for. I think the other piece of this, and you mentioned it, but it's really important, I've heard it in conversations over and over this week, is just the permitting and grid connection processes. We need to streamline those. And I think the final piece that we haven't really touched on, but is really critical, is the market design. How do we make sure we've got effective market designs to really ensure we have the flexibility, the storage in the system that's going to bring these different pieces together? So businesses are definitely behind this agenda. They're asking for these policies. Now it's just a question of, are governments going to act? Are they going to be able to take advantage of this electric advantage?
So it's kind of like, okay, so we need, you know, renewables, they have to go further and faster. We need energy efficiency, that needs to go further and faster. We need long duration energy storage, that needs to go really, really much faster and further. And then we need the grids to be able to manage all this in a smart and intelligent way. Yeah. So you can probably see a little lights flashing. There's kind of green on the renewable energy. It's always semi-green, isn't it? The grids are sort of orange, red color. And you know what I mean? There's just, you can see the tracker right now, right? What about the rest of the world? Because, I mean, one thing about the Straits of Hormuz was we learned that, you know, the Asian region, for example, was particularly vulnerable to this shutdown in supplies of fossil fuels. But then there seems to be a sort of quick response there. Are they moving faster now? Are some of your markets that you talked about, the ASEAN region? Yeah?
So I think it's really interesting. There, I think it's IEA's tracking some of these policies, and what you've seen in the last several months is that they've really moved, in particular on EVs. So putting in policies to really accelerate EVs and move away from ICE vehicles. We're seeing that in Chile, we're seeing that in Indonesia, and India is also pushing for electric cook stoves. So I think across the world, you're seeing a strong policy response to this. And again, it's different because if we liken this to like the oil crisis of the 70s, that was very strong on nuclear, it was strong on energy efficiency, it was creating the International Energy Agency. We're really seeing that strong reaction on the demand side and energy efficiency too. There's still quite a few policies, and rightly so, that are coming on how do we use less energy, because that's going to reduce the amount we need to import.
So, I mean, cynics, just wrapping up the last thing, cynics might say, oh, we always have these targets and timetables coming out of COPs, you know, somebody's got to find a cool thing to do, and so in the maybe some COPs nothing's happening, so they have to cook something up at the end, you know, some new initiative on something. I don't know. And we have this one on tripling and doubling, you know, doubling energy efficiency and tripling renewables. Wasn't that good enough, or should they have done something else? I mean, in other words, why do we have to have this 35 by 35? Is that just another shop window, but there's nothing behind it? Or do you know what I'm saying? Do we think there's something different happening to these outcomes at these big global conferences?
I mean, I think it creates a trifecta, right? I think the tripling and the doubling are absolutely critical. But again, if we want to get fossil fuels out of the system, you have to electrify. And it hasn't been part of the conversation. So I personally am just really excited that it's moving up the agenda. And I think it's how these three intersect that's really going to be transformative.
Yeah. Vicky, go on.
No, and I think I think on the one hand, it's great if we would get an international acknowledged, negotiated outcome. But I think the nuance is in the detail, right? Because this implementation lies in national governments. So how do we use all of that in order to get national governments in place to implement this, giving the right side of financial incentives, right? Because like I said, there's a big difference between different parts of the world. So how do we make sure that, you know, debt is not increased in countries by just, you know, putting this target in place.
Debt cancellation.
So, exactly.
In
So
Africa,
we can go on but I think we shouldn't get too hung up on just getting that goal in place, because we already have a lot in place. So let's also accelerate the implementation on that. On the other hand, I think sending a strong signal by a multilateralism agreed goal is always a good thing for national governments to feel supported in the implementation.
Let me just add to that. I mean, I agree with what you both said there about the trifecta, national plans. I think what national targets do is they drive accountability of governments, particularly talking about in the global north here. And I think that's really important for civil society to be able to use in terms of putting pressure on governments, plus business and so on. I think is really important indeed to have those. But I mean, the other point I would make is look at what is happening in the real world now.
Yes.
You know, Asia, you mentioned, I mean, China. Yeah, that's my answer there. China's going gangbusters now on electric vehicles, right? You know, so this is the future.
Good. So I think we'll have a wrap it there. But then what we're saying is, if it ends up being not 35 by 35, but 34 by 36, it's still good progress. In other words, 34% of electrification by 2036. We won't all cry into our wee teacups and go, it didn't happen. Yeah, on time. Yeah. So it's good to set targets. And if you don't quite meet them, it's not the end of the world. Good. Thank you very much for being here. Absolutely super. And wish you lots of luck in London Climate Action Week for the days that are left. I think there's probably a party tomorrow. Okay.
That would be fun.
Thank you very much.
Wonderful.